Hi, I'm Cynthia Akins, and this is my story. I grew up in Tennessee, about 25 miles west of Nashville. I'm the oldest of five children. We had a fairly good childhood. Um, my mother took us all to church, except my dad. He wouldn't go with us. But one Sunday he decided to go, and he and my mom both got saved, and I decided that I loved Jesus and I wanted to be saved too. So I went to the altar, and then we all got baptized shortly after that in the local creek. Um, our entire family changed after that. Our home was happy and peaceful and loving, and um, it's wonderful. And I didn't realize how bad it had been until I saw how good it was, because it was all I had known. About a year later, we moved away from that area, and my mom had to find a new church for us to go to, and my dad said he wasn't going to change churches, and so he didn't, and he never went to church with us again. Um, Shortly after that, he allowed alcohol into his life, became an alcoholic, um, and allowed that to totally destroy our entire family. I became very angry at my dad. I really hated my dad. Our life was so bad then, and all I could think about was getting away from him. And so I began counting down the days till I would be 18 when I was 16 years old. And I was going to move to Nashville, get an apartment, get a job, and just have a happy life. And 3 months before I turned 18, I met a man that was 10 years older than me. And he was already established in his life, and he asked me to marry him, and so I did. And so on the day that I turned 18, I left, and we were married 3 days later. It didn't take long before I realized what a horrible mistake I had made, but I had burned so many bridges already behind me that I didn't feel I had anywhere to go back to, and so I stayed. And that thing that I had learned from my dad getting saved and seeing how our family had changed, I thought, if I just stay and pray for this man, then God can change his life and we can have a happy family too. And so I stayed for a really long time doing that. Not too long into the marriage, the verbal abuse began. I was told how stupid I was and how dumb I was, and called very ugly names, and told that I was nothing and nobody, and and that tears you down on the inside. It destroys you as a person if you believe it. And there came a point in time that I believed what he told me. I believed that about myself, that I was nothing, and that I had no worth and no value. And the physical abuse began after that, and it gradually increased over the years. Both, it happened more times and it got more violent over the years. And I left a number of times. The first time I tried to leave, I just did like most people would do and ask for a divorce. But, that's not something you can do in that relationship. And I didn't know that at the time. I found out the really hard way that you can't just ask for a divorce. So I never asked for another divorce, but I did leave a number of times. But because of what had been done to me tearing me down. I didn't feel that I was able to stay on, that I didn't feel able to take care of myself. And, I always got the same story, that it'll be better and I won't do that again. And I'm sorry. And I love you. And each time I would go back, I ended up having 2 children. I had 2 boys, which were the highlight of my life. They gave me hope and purpose, and I loved them with every fiber of my being. I stayed until 16. I've been there for 16 years, which was the biggest time frame. When I left was the longest time I had been gone. I left and I moved in with my parents, and I got a job and was able to support me and my boys. And I got a place for us to live. We finally had our own home, and we were 9 months into, and I filed for divorce also. And I was 9 months into it, and the court forced me to let my children go and spend the weekend with him. And they were 7 and 11. And on Sunday, when they were supposed to come back, he had my 7-year-old to call me and say, we can't come home. He's not going to let us come home. And then he got on the phone and said, pack all your stuff and get back where you belong, or you'll never see them again. And so he came with a U-Haul, and he moved all of our stuff back to his house. And I sank into a really deep, dark hole of depression, because all the other times I had left and come back willingly. Always it's my decision to come back, but this time was not my decision to come back. I was forced to, and I felt like a prisoner then. I still did my job, of being a mother and loving my children and taking good care of them. And at night, I sat in a closet and begged God to come and get me and just let it be over, because I couldn't live like that anymore. About a year after I went back, we were out on a boat, all of us, and we had a boating accident, and I was thrown up in the air. And when I came back down, I hit the boat and broke my tailbone. I had severe whiplash. I had 3 vertebrae locked out of place in my spine. I couldn't get any help. There was nothing they could do for me at the hospital, and they gave me pain pills and muscle relaxers. The chiropractor couldn't adjust me. They said that it would be 6 months before I could turn my head, and 6 months before I would be able to sit without a donut. And it would be a while before I could sit at all. And so I laid in the bed. He took me home and left, and then my 2 boys were there to take care of me for days by themselves. And I couldn't get out of bed. They came and pulled me out of bed just to get me to go to the restroom and bring me back and put me back to bed. And I laid in that bed and I watched TV all day. And all these shows were coming on with these different teachers and preachers, and they were talking about depression and divorce and abuse, and they were all addressing all these issues in my life. And it was people that I would never have listened to before that were speaking to me. And then on the 3rd day, I was laying there, and this pastor came on talking about healing, and I just grabbed the remote, and I was like, I've watched all these other programs. I said to God, I've watched all these other programs. I'm not watching this, because I didn't believe in healing. I thought that it was fake. I thought that people were just told to say what they said on TV, for monetary gain, basically. And So I didn't believe it, and so I grabbed the remote to change the channel, and I tried several times to push the button to change it, and I never could push down. It was like there was some type of force holding my thumb up. And I actually threw the remote, and because I was angry, and I said, okay, I'll watch it. And so I had always said to myself that if I could ever see a little child get healed, then I would believe, because I wouldn't think that you could program them to say what you wanted them to say. And so this show began, and the first person up was a little 3-year-old boy, and his parents had brought him there with an inoperable tumor on his spine, and he'd never walked. And so, the pastor told the story, and he asked everybody to pray for the little boy, and everybody did. And then he set him down, and you could tell that he never walked. He didn't even know how to take a step, and he showed him how to take a step, and then another step, and then another. And then in a few minutes, the little boy was walking, and then in a few more minutes, the little boy was running. And like, the parents are on the floor crying, everybody's there is crying, the pastor's crying, I'm crying, and I don't realize this, but while this is happening, I have been dragging myself. I'm on a king-size bed, and the TV is on the wall across from the foot of the bed, and I'm dragging myself with my fist, on my side, to get closer to that, and I didn't realize it until I was at the foot of the bed. And so the pastor, and that was about the time the little boy was running, and the pastor said, so if you need to be healed, all you have to do is ask Jesus. Just believe that he'll heal you, and ask him, and he'll do it. And so I pushed myself up best I could to, sit on the side of my leg, and I just prayed a simple prayer, and I said, dear Jesus, I ask that you would take this pain away, because I can't bear it any longer. And I know now that you can. And I had my eyes closed when I prayed that, and this really intense heat began at the base of my skull. And it was the width of my neck, and it just proceeded slowly down my neck. And when it got in the middle of my neck, I had this thought, the boys must have come in here and put the heating pad on me, And I opened my eyes and looked around, and nobody was there. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is really real. This is so real. This is really happening. And that width of that heat went all the way to the tip of my tailbone. And the next time I opened my eyes, I was sitting in the middle of my king-size bed, Indian style. And so when you're sitting Indian style, all you're sitting on is your tailbone. And instantly I heard this voice say, you're not really healed. You're just sitting in the middle of this big soft bed. And out of me just came, without any thought or anything, I said, yes, I am, because I could not even turn my head. And I turned and looked over both shoulders, and my neck had been totally locked. It had not moved since the accident. And so I slid to the foot of the bed, because I couldn't wait to go tell my boys, because they were really concerned about me. And I couldn't wait to go show them that, Mama was healed. And I stood up, I jumped up and stood up, and then I just fell straight back on the bed. Just light as a feather, I just fell right back on the bed. And I laid there really confused, and I said, so what is this, God? Like, I thought I was just healed, and now I'm paralyzed, like I can't even stand. And so I scooted to the foot of the bed again, and I stood up again, and I did the same thing. I just fell straight back on the bed, just light as a feather. But this time, when I got about to this angle, there was this picture that began to play right in front of my eyes. It was a scene from a church, and there was a pulpit, and there was a pastor standing there, and there were people around the pulpit, and the pastor was, taking his hand and putting on their heads, and they're falling on the floor. And that had always bothered me, and I always thought, if they just got healed, why are you pushing them on the floor? Like, why are you doing that? But in this, I could see between the pastor's hand and the people's head, and he never touched them. He was just doing this, and they were falling on the floor. And I said, oh my goodness, That's the power of God on those people. That's the power of God on me. That's why I can't stand. And so I just laid there and I praised God for quite a while. And then when I stood up the next time, I was fine and strong and healed and pain-free. And I ran into the living room where my boys were, and I was jumping and shouting. And I sat on the couch and the chair arm and everything. And I was turning my neck and showing them how healed I was. And God used that moment to change my entire life, you know. So I always loved him, but that was, I don't know, that was just a tangible, you know, something, you know, it just made him, he was so real to me. My life didn't really change much after that. As far as my home life, he didn't believe that I was healed. He didn't believe anything, you know, about that, which was fine. You know, I knew what had happened. So that was in the summertime, and then the following Easter, the depression and all that was still there. You know, all of the bad, everything was still there. And this Easter night, I just knelt in my bedroom floor with my face on the floor, and I said, Lord, if there's anything left of my life that you want, it's yours if you'll just get me out of this situation. And I'll not make any more decisions without consulting you. And I got up out of the floor, and through a series of events, 3 months later, he told me that it was time to go. And so I rented a U-Haul, and I put my 2 boys and my 2 birds and our 2 dogs in it and a few personal belongings, and I drove off. And I didn't have anywhere to go. I didn't know where to go because he didn't tell me where to go. He just told me to leave. And I had only told my mom that I was leaving, and I made her promise not to tell my dad. But of course she did. And my dad called and said, you know, why don't you come here and stay for a few days to figure out what to do? And so that's what I did. And that was on July the 1st. And by July the 5th, I had a home. I had my own home completely with new furniture, new everything. And then the restoration process began. God began healing me and restoring me from that moment on. So I said to him, you've answered everything else, so now where do I go to church? And he said, you remember that church that you said you would never go to again? And I said, yes. And he said, that's the one. And I said, okay. Because I had visited Christian Fellowship just 2 years prior when I had moved in with my parents. And, you know, I had tried to help my mom find a church, and we had visited here and was doing a revival, and it was totally different from anything that I was accustomed to. And I just said, we're not ever coming back here. But here I was 2 years later, and I had experienced the presence of God, and I had experienced a miracle of healing in my life. And I came here, and it was just like coming home. And I understood what I saw here before, and I understood the exuberance for God, and, you know, the love and the passion that I saw here for God that I was not accustomed to before. I cried every day for the first 2 years. It was so much healing in those tears. It's quite a miraculous thing that God has done with our tears. And then I was here. So many people in this church helped me. But so many people started coming around and telling me, you know, that did you know that you're supposed to write a book? And I was like, no, I didn't know that. And so multiple people told me, and so I agreed that I would do that. And then God told me to go to school. And I didn't have a desire to go back to school, but he said that I needed to go back to school. And so when he told me, I went the next day, and applied. And it was the last day of late registration. And I'd been out of school for 20 years, and I had to go and take my ACT, and I don't even remember what I made on it, but it was enough that they accepted me, and I started school. And so I went to school for 5 years. I took one semester off. Most semesters I took 15 to 21 hours a semester. I did that during the day, and at night I worked 35 and 40 hours a week as a server at a restaurant, and took care of my 2 boys and raised them. And I got my bachelor's degree in communications with a minor in psychology. And I barely had time to study, because there's not much daylight left after a day like that. And I didn't even know what my GPA was during that. I didn't even care. I was just doing what I was supposed to do. And at the end, when I was fixing to graduate, when they were figuring up your GPA and doing awards and stuff, I was 100th of a point from awards. And that was impressive to me, because I didn't really have time to study and give it really my all, because of all my responsibilities. But one thing that it did was that it was kind of like God was showing me, He was letting me prove it to myself, that all that I'd been told was a lie, that I wasn't stupid. I wasn't stupid at all, because I was able to go and graduate from a university, and get my bachelor's degree and be 100th of a point from honors. And so I did that. After that, I became a realtor. I've been a realtor for a long time now. I built my own house by myself. I mean, I didn't physically build it, but I had my own home built. I've raised my children. They're grown and have families of their own. And through all of that, I worked on the book, and I wrote when God told me to write, and I only wrote what He told me to write about. And when He would tell me to write, sometimes it would be hard to type as fast as what was pouring into me. I finished the book 3 years ago, so it took 23 years to write it. And I printed it out, and I put it in a box, and I put it in my closet, and because that's all He told me to do was write it. And so I wrote it, and then He didn't tell me to do anything with it. And so I was not happy, but I was okay with that. I was like, well, maybe it was just for me, just for my healing, getting all that out of me. And also I didn't have to let everybody else know all my stuff, But at the beginning of last year, He said, it's time to publish it, like at the very beginning of the year. And so I began the process, and then in the middle of the editing process is when COVID began. And so I kind of slowed the process down a lot, but I got it completed, and in August of last year, it was published. It's called My Gritty Daughter. So it took 25 years from conception to publishing. And 25, by the way, means grace upon grace, which is what I've had in my life. I wrote the book to the abused woman or man or child, to the abused person, and I said woman because I am a woman. I was speaking to women. But it's not just to the abused person. It deals not only with abuse, but with drug and alcohol addiction, depression. And even if you haven't dealt with all those things, it deals with faith and with hope and joy and peace, and all the things that God brings in your life, and deals with restoration. And, even if you haven't dealt with a lot of bad stuff in your life, it's still encouraging to see how God can take somebody that's completely shattered and broken to pieces, and He can take them and raise them up and restore them and make them whole again and make them successful, and enable them to go forward and have a good life. And so the passion is for those people, because especially those women that are trapped in that situation. I didn't want to stay there, I didn't want to be in that situation. The people that are being abused, they don't want to be in that situation. They are not enjoying it, they don't like it. They want to be free. And so I wanted to tell them how I got free, and I wanted to tell them and show them that with the love of Jesus, and with the power of the Holy Spirit in your life, that you can be healed and be restored and delivered and have a good life. There is a life after that destructive life. And so that's the cry and the passion, and the thing that drives me is to just go forth and let people know about the love of Jesus and how He can change their lives too, that it's not hopeless, that there is hope. As long as you're still breathing, there's hope.